Hello, my name is Justin Moss. In this video, I'm going to be giving a defense of the Protestant religion. This video is in response to Cleave to Antiquity's recent announcement that he is leaving Protestantism and hopes to convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. A lot of people online have reacted to his announcement in a very poor way, in a way in which they are now scared that there may not be a good reason to remain a Protestant. A lot of people are leaving Protestantism to institutions like Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Oriental Orthodoxy, in hopes that they will be in an ancient institution. But is this really the goal? Is Protestantism not that ancient? Is Protestantism not apostolic? In this video, I want to give a defense of the Protestant religion and argue that Protestantism is actually the most apostolic branch of Christianity that there is today. First, I want to go over, well, what even is a Protestant? A lot of people have this misconception of the word, thinking that Protestants can be anyone who is not a Roman Catholic, and that's simply not true. A lot of people think that Protestants can be Pentecostals or Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons even. I've heard everything online, but is this really true? My argument is no, it's not that true at all. Nick Needham, a church historian, wrote in his third volume of 2,000 Years of Christ's Power on page 139 of what a Protestant actually is. The historical context goes back to the year 1526, in which there was a diet in Speyer. It was decreed that Roman Catholics ought to be tolerated in Lutheran lands, but Lutherans were not to be tolerated in Roman Catholic lands. In response to this decree, Lutheran delegates were outraged and published a document objecting to the decree. The document was called the Protestation. 6 princes and 14 imperial cities signed it. From the Protestation, the name Protestant came to be applied to all adherents of the Reformation. Well, who even are the adherents of the Reformation? Nick Needham argues that it's the Lutherans and the Reformed. Nick Needham argues this position on page 253 in his third volume, saying that we ought to distinguish what is called the Magisterial Reformation, or the Protestant Reformation, which its adherents are Lutherans and Reformed, and we must distinguish this from what is known as the Radical Reformation. Between the Magisterial Reformation and the Radical Reformation, these two different reformations had different approaches and beliefs in regard to theology and their approach to church-state relations, etc. Now, the adherents of the Radical Reformation can be labeled in 3 groups: the Anabaptists, the Spiritualist, and the Rationalist, and these are not to be mistaken as Protestants. The Radical Reformation is not Protestant in any historic sense of the word. Nick Needham goes on to argue that the word Protestant, in which its adherents are Lutherans and Reformed, the word Protestant is not to mean merely a person who protests against the abuses of Rome. A Protestant is someone who has a far more positive thing to say, has an affirmative meaning. Is to protest with the transitive verb, which meant to declare, to deform, to set forth a position. So Protestants aren't just people who are protesting against the abuses of Rome, but they're people who are protesting the gospel in an affirmative sense, in a positive sense. Now here raises the real question. What is it that Lutherans and the Reformed are protesting in the positive or affirmative sense? We all know that both Lutherans and Reformed are protesting against the abuses of Rome, but what is it that they're actually protesting in the positive and affirmative sense? What is it that they're protesting? What is their religion? On page 139 and volume 3 of the Institutes of Ellenic Theology, Francis Turretin has to say that our religion, talking about the Protestant religion, is that which is wholly occupied with knowing the one and triune God, the Creator, Preserver, and Redeemer, and rightly worshiping Him according to His command. It is our religion which recognizes no other rule of faith and practice besides the sacred scriptures. It is our religion which teaches that God alone is to be adored and invoked and does not allow the glory and the religious worship due to Him to be transferred to creatures. It is our religion which depresses man as much as possible by taking away from him all presumption of his own strength and merits. It is our religion which proclaims war against all vices, recommends all virtues, and presses the necessity of holiness and good works unto salvation. It is our religion which brings solid peace and consolation to the soul of the believer in life and in death by the true confidence which it orders him to place, not in the uncertainty and vanity of his own righteousness or human satisfactions, but on the sole mercy of God and the most perfect righteousness of Christ, which, applied to the heart by faith, takes away doubt and distrust and generates a vivid persuasion of salvation after this life. It is our religion which not only does not forbid the reading of the sacred scriptures as dangerous, but commands it as most useful and highly necessary. It is our religion which, content with the two sacraments instituted by Christ, rejects all others as the inventions of human genius. Francis Turretin goes on to say in the next page that from their confession, referring to the Church of Rome, we gather the truth of our religion and church. For since we believe nothing as to articles merely affirmative, they ought to confess either that our faith is true or that theirs, which they hold in common with us, is false. This is a very powerful recognition that Francis Turretin has. Francis Turretin is arguing that, well, the articles of faith that we believe in, the heads that we profess, are also found in the confessions of our opponents. And by necessity, if what they are saying is true, then what we believe is also true. Our church is true too. But if what they're saying is false in regards to these affirmative articles and heads, then so is our too. So Francis Turretin goes on to say then later on the page, but about negative and exclusive articles which she thrusts forth to us as necessary to be believed, we, however, constantly reject them as false and erroneous. In other words, in order for one of the opponents of Protestantism to falsify the Protestant religion, it has to bring forth negative and exclusive articles of the faith and of heads of doctrine and religion. And that's a very interesting remark here. On page 227 of A Reformed Catholic, William Perkins has something very similar to say as Francis Turretin did. In his chapter, An Advertisement to All Favorers of the Roman Religion, Perkins says that the Roman religion now established by the Council of Trent is in the principal points thereof against the very grounds of the catechism that have been agreed upon ever since the days of the apostles by all churches. These grounds are four. The first is the Apostles' Creed. The second is the Ten Commandments. The third is the form of prayer called the Lord's Prayer. And the fourth is the institution of the two sacraments, baptism and the Lord's Supper. These four grounds, Perkins argues, is the quote-unquote catechism that have been agreed upon ever since the days of the apostles by all churches. Now, what William Perkins just said there is actually very historically accurate, and even contemporary historians agree upon what he had to say. On page 27 of Justification and Perspective, Nick Needham had to say that he has a doubt whether the consensus of the fathers over that period extended much beyond the Apostles' Creed. Now, before I continue on, I must give an account as to why the Apostles' Creed matters and is very important even today in the 21st century. Well, the Apostles' Creed was written during the early church in the context of the church battling against the heresy of Gnosticism. In the creed, it declares that I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church. On page 112 of his first volume of 2,000 Years of Christ's Power, Nick Needham has to say that the church in both East and West called itself simply Catholic, which means universal or throughout the world. By calling itself Catholic, the early church was setting itself apart from Gnosticism, again, a heresy in the early church. The different Gnostic sects had no unity. They all taught the conflicting doctrines. But the true church, which I believe he is here referring to the Church Catholic, founded on the faith of the apostles, taught the same doctrines throughout the world. So the early Christians called themselves Catholics to express the unity of their common faith and to distinguish themselves from Gnostics and other deviant groups. So this is a very interesting remark here. It is that the Apostles' Creed is saying that I believe in the Catholic Church. The Catholic word here is to mean universal throughout the world. And the Catholic Church is this true church. It is founded on the faith of the apostles and teaches the same doctrines throughout the world. And this is an expression of unity. Now, going back to William Perkins, in his book, A Reformed Catholic, on page 228, he has to say, the Apostles' Creed, which has been thought to contain all necessary points in religion to be believed, and has therefore been called the key and rule of faith, this creed, I say, has not any of these points, nor the expositions made thereof by the ancient fathers, nor any other creed or confession of faith made by any council or church for the space of many hundred years. Now, what are these points that Perkins is arguing that the Apostles' Creed doesn't contain? Well, just earlier, some of these points are doctrines believed in the Church of Rome, such as that the Pope or Bishop of Rome is the vicar of Christ and the head of the Catholic Church, that there is a fire of purgatory after this life, the images of God and saints are to be placed in churches and worshipped, that prayers to be made to saints departed and their intercession to be required, that there is a propitiatory sacrifice daily offered in the Mass for the sins of the quick and the dead. What is actually being said here? Well, what's actually being said is that the Protestant religion is protesting in the affirmative and positive sense of the term the creed, the Apostles' Creed. The Protestant is protesting in the affirmative and positive sense the articles contained in the Apostles' Creed, which is said to contain everything necessary to believe in religion. And this is where things start to turn a little bit. Well, the Protestant is protesting the Apostles' Creed, the Ecumenical Creed, the Creed Catholic. The Protestant is protesting the Catholic Church in the affirmative and positive sense of the term. The Protestant is the one who examines the Apostles' Creed and believes it as necessary to what is to be believed in regards of religion. Meanwhile, the Church of Rome adds on to the Apostles' Creed articles which they think is necessary to believe in regards to religion, what they think is necessary to believe for salvation. Now, something I want to argue is that the Church of Rome isn't the only institution doing this. We also see the Eastern Orthodox Church saying you must believe this and that articles in order to have salvation, and yet those articles aren't contained in the Apostles' Creed. So what the Protestant is saying is that the Apostles' Creed, which historically speaking was one of the only things that the fathers had consensus on, it was the creed by which the church was to become known as Catholic. It was the creed that the church taught throughout the world. It was the creed which has been believed in by all churches since the days of the apostles as containing the articles necessary to believe in religion. In other words, the Protestant is the person who believes and protests the Apostles' Creed. Meanwhile, non-Protestants, those who are opposing Protestantism, may believe the Apostles' Creed and teach it necessary, but they add on to it. Again, in other words, Protestants are protesting the Apostles' Creed in the affirmative sense. We affirm the articles of the Catholic Church. Meanwhile, opponents of Protestantism, such as Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and others, just to name a few, have added negative or exclusive articles to their church, which they teach is necessary to believe for religion, which they teach is necessary to believe for salvation. So here is the question. Here is the ultimate question at the end of the day when we take all this information together. It is, who knew better? Was it the Apostolic Church, which left us the simple grounds of faith in the Apostles' Creed, the 10 Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, and the sacraments? Or is it later churches, later institutions, developing itself and adding more requirements and additions necessary for salvation? Who knows better? The consensus of the fathers and all churches since the apostolic era, in which agreed upon the Apostles' Creed as containing what's necessary to believe in for salvation? Or is it non-Protestant institutions which teach that it's not just the Apostles' Creed in which you must believe in, but it's other articles of the faith, negative and exclusive articles? Who knows better? Here comes my conclusion. If the Apostolic Church knew better, then you should be a Protestant. If the Catholic Church knows better, you should be a Protestant. But if later traditions, institutions like Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy know better, then you shouldn't be a Protestant. Then you shouldn't be a Protestant. It's that simple. It really is that simple. So for everyone watching this video, for every Protestant feeling wary, scared, anxious, that there may not be a good reason to remain as a Protestant, just remember, the Protestant is the person who's protesting the gospel, protesting the Apostles' Creed, protesting the Catholic Church and faith in the affirmative and positive sense. Meanwhile, non-Protestants are adding on additions, adding on negative and exclusive articles in which they think is necessary to believe in for salvation. It is that simple. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, thought it was good, please hit a thumbs up, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. If you have feedback on this video or what I had to say, or if you want to hear me discuss further topics, feel free to comment down in this video. I'll be reading every comment, and I'll be trying my hardest to reply to all the comments I see. If you want to find more of me, I am on Instagram and Twitter. God bless you all. Take care. Goodbye.